השיר משה ובני ישראל את השירה הזאת לאדוני ויאמרו לאמור השירה לאדוני כי גאו גאה סוס ורוכבו רמה בים עוזי וזמרת יה ויהי לי לישוע זה אלי וענווהו אהיה אבי ורוממנו.
Morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Or should we say, since it's Sephardi Ashkenazi, I'll say Shabbos.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Hey, sweet people. Good to see you all up bright and early on the Shabbos. We have a lot of geographic diversity. I see a lot of friends in different places of the world. Baruch Hashem, some people around the corner. Thank you for making us your Shabbat morning wake up with Torah. It's a good thing.
It is a very good thing.
We're going to be talking about some waking up. Also, we're going to be talking about different, expressions of waking up and the meaning of sanctuary and the meaning. So, open book. Welcome to the open book. Yeah, awesome.
It's interesting because this parsha or last parsha too, this parsha we're leaving narrative. Right? Yeah, it was last parsha too. We left narrative. So sometimes it's harder to get into the meat of things when it's not a big, grand, majestic story. But there's so much here. And I think some of what's here actually does evoke that larger narrative, that love story between God and the Israelites.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll begin with, we're going to just set out the framework again. So sometimes it's easier to remind. We've been playing with so many different frameworks in the open book and in general, trying to make use of both the technology and the community and kind of dancing between them. We're gonna begin with a blessing of a Torah, and then I think Rabbi Klovetzis and I are going to teach for about 15 or so minutes, and around 9 o'clock or so, we're going to open it up for more conversation. Then we'll have another period for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have another period of teaching the text together, and then we'll open it up again and ask people to, during the time that we're teaching, to keep the chat closed, and we'll focus together, and then we'll open it up as well. So, anyone you want to choose somebody to?
Yeah. What about Daniel? Would you like to do the bracha? Daniel Berlin. I think you can unmute yourself. I think. No?
Yes, folks should be able to unmute themselves. I'm not sure why it's not working, so I'll figure that out. But
There we go. There we go. Just a little technological glitch in the force field here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen. All right, folks. You share the screen. Give us a bit of a thumbs up if you, as soon as this becomes, we hope, visible. Yeah, visible, great. Awesome. And let's make it a little bit larger for folks. Okay.
All right. Here we go.
וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר בני ישראל וייחו לי תרומה. God spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the Israelites. Take for me, truma, a gift offering, me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo, from each person whose heart will be generously moved, take et trumati, tikhu et trumati, take my offering.
I know we're going to go on in a second, but I just love that the gift is willing, is depending on willingness, that this is not a command. You know, usually when you see that God speaks to Moses, you expect, you know, the language of command, but here it's the language of willingness, which I find so moving. Like they're moved and I feel moved by their being moved.
But what's interesting though also is that, I mean, this is a tension that is it giving or is it taking? So it's kind of an interesting thing.
That is interesting.
Take a truma as opposed to ask for a truma.
Yeah.
It's kind of like they want generosity, but there's a quality of obligation or taking. It's kind of a strange.
Why obligate? It's interesting because I hear empowerment in that. Like, take it. Like there's, it's very much active.
But take from, tikhume, it's like take from them, but only the ones who are generously giving. So it's kind of like already in there, kind of a stira.
Yeah, you're right. And vayichu li truma, like take from me a truma, he's saying that to Moshe. So it's, there's something about that that's a little bit.
Which will invite this kind of interesting midrashim, which we'll see in a moment, the rabbinic expansion on the strange word lakachat, which means to take instead of like to ask for or to tell them latate or matana to give. So it's right there. But what is this gift? So we'll see the gift in verse 3. Zot truma.
Asher tichumi tam zahav v'cheset nechoshet. So these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, which we will see will become very significant, silver and copper. Utchelet v'argaman v'tolat shani v'sheish v'izim, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair.
V'arot elim adamim v'arot chashim v'atzei shitim, tanned ram skins. I know, dolphin skins and acacia wood. All the things that they might, readily have available to them in the desert.
In the wilderness, dolphin skin, sure.
Yeah, dolphin skins, for sure. Shemen lama'or, also oil for lighting. Bisamim l'shemen hamishcha, and also, aromatic incense for the anointing oil. V'liktor asamim, and also for the incense. Right.
Avnei shoham v'avnei miluim la'ephod v'la'choshen. Lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece. Now here's the crux of the matter. Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti bitocham, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. K'chol asher ani mar'eh otcha et tavnit hamishkan ve'et tavnit kol kelav v'chen ta'asu. Exactly as I show you, and one wonders reading this, like where is and how is God showing Moshe, the design and the image of this Mishkan, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it. V'chen ta'asu in the plural, which is interesting.
Right. This becomes, in the Midrash, we're not going to go there, but this becomes like I think the well-known rabbinic trope, which is that Moshe wasn't exactly sure how to do it, like he needed help, he had to be shown. I will show you exactly what to be done, and also this is the underpinnings of the notion that there's a Mishkan below and a Mishkan above, a tabernacle below and a tabernacle above. But here, what's remarkable, of course, is make for me a sanctuary that I might dwell with you. What might be the nature of that sanctuary, given given the difficulty of imagining, what is it to build a house for God in this world? What does that even mean? We have this.
Well, what does it mean to build a house for God, and what does it mean for God to dwell?
To dwell.
Right. What does it mean for God's presence to be amongst us?
Right.
And how does that happen?
How does that happen? So we have this second source in Isaiah 66. Do you want it?
Sure. כה אמר אדוני, השמיים כסאי והארץ הדום רגלי. איזה בית אשר תבנו לי ואיזה מקום מנוחתי. So this is very dramatic, right? So God says,
Sorry, 1 second.
God says something. The heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where could you build a house for me? What place could serve as my abode? In other words, how could I'm so grand and magnificent and limitless. How could I possibly, fit into any place on this earth? There's no place in which, would contain me.
So this verse, we brought this verse because it actually sets up a tension in terms of understanding the function of the Mishkan, the function of, at least within our rabbinic tradition, what might be the function of the actual physical sanctuary. And it sets up a tension because there's a kind of rhetorical question that is, that, as it were, in the mouth of God, which is like, is it really possible to build a structure in which the infinite can be, located?
Yeah.
And is it possible to be intimate with God in that way, right? Is God beyond all of these forms, within them, like what exactly is going on? And that leads us to this really, this Sikta de Rav Kahana, this midrash, this beautiful midrash that you discovered. Why don't you take us through this midrash?
Sure. Okay, so B'sha'a Shamar Lo, Va'asu li Mikdash. So at the time that God said to Moshe, make me a sanctuary, make me a Mikdash, Amar Moshe lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe said before God, Ribono shel olam, hinei hashamayim v'shmei hashamayim, lo yichal chalucha. Is that right?
Yeah.
Va'ata amarta va'asu li mikdash. So, Master of the universe, the highest heavens cannot contain you, and yet you say, let them make me a sanctuary. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So God says to Moshe, lo kisha'ata savor. Moshe, it's not the way that you think. You don't understand like the godly ways here. Ella esrim crash b'tzafon ve'esrim crash b'darom. Rather, 20 boards to the north, 20 boards to the south, shmona b'ma'arav, and 8 to the west. Va'ani yored u'mitzamtzem shchinati beinechem lamatan. And I will descend and contract. Mitzamsem, from the same root as tzimtzum, my presence, as it says, the no'adati l'cha sham, my presence, Shechina, among you below. So that, I'm not sure that I caught the translation here, but that refers to the place of, where it says later in the Parsha, it describes the kruvim, the 2 cherubim, in whose midst God will testify or speak to Moshe.
So if you're wondering if this is the first place where where we find in rabbinic literature the word tzimtzum, it's not, but it's pretty close. And so for those of you who know the later idea of tzimtzum in Lurianic Kabbalah,
I think you mean part of Romemu would not know.
I know.
About tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum is like it's such an important idea. It's such an important part of later Kabbalistic thinking. And here you have the question within the Midrash already is assuming, like in the mind of the rabbis who are writing the Midrash, that everybody knows that this is a problem. Like it's like, you have Isaiah saying, Ezehu bayit asher tivnu li, what kind of place can hold me? And then you have them place it into the conversation between God and Moshe, where Moshe says, you want us to build a Mishkan, and like my understanding of God doesn't allow for that. And then the rabbis say that in God's own self-understanding, no, it's not the way that you imagine it. Like, do what I'm telling you. Put the, 20 boards to the left and to the north and south, and right, and I'm going to contract my presence into this abode. And so you have this, it doesn't tell us what the function of the Mishkan is. It doesn't tell us actually how to imagine its purpose, as it were. But we do have like the invitation of thinking about the possibility that God can live in this world in a contracted way, like in that way.
This is how it's possible. This is how it's going to work. But what I find really interesting about this midrash is that even Moshe doesn't understand the ways of God, and I find that interesting, especially when so many of us insist that God is this or that. Like, oh, there's not a God out there, there's God in here, or there's no God in here, there's God out there. It's like, sort of being wed to one way of understanding God, when even Moshe doesn't understand how God works.
And whoever's writing the Midrash is also themselves kind of using these characters, like in order to invite, who knows, at their time, maybe there was a moment where people were thinking that God was so transcendent, or that God was beyond even understanding. And it plays into the general Jewish idea that the God of the cosmos is interested in the minutiae of human life and in the details of our lives. And this Midrash wants to use its authority to tell us not to give up on finding God here right now, right
here.
So that sets us up for a little bit of a conversation about, let's talk about the actual Mishkan itself and take a little bit more time before we open it up for people. So the source of the gold, right? So, when we move from the possibility of God being intimate with us in this world to the actual vehicle for that intimacy, from the possibility of it to the actuality of it, we have something, very interesting just to draw our attention to, but not to get stuck there for too long, is that the gold that is used in the construction of the Mishkan, as you just saw in the beginning of the parsha, we said, Zav v'chesef u'nechoshet, that there's gold being used, and that's in one of the first metals. And so where does that gold come from? The gold comes clearly from the end of the Jewish Exodus narrative. The Israelites leave Egypt, and as you see in source number 4, they are, it's Egyptian gold. It's Egyptian gold that they take with them, as it were, as you see in source 4 and source 5, right? That they got this, they took with them chesef and klei zahav. And as you move into source number 6 here in this beautiful Midrash Tanchuma, this Midrash Tanchuma, again, a late Midrash or early Midrash source, late in the millennia, in the first millennia, you have this beautiful image. The Midrash quotes the verse that we just read, "Make for me a mikdash, a sanctuary, and I will dwell with you." This is so beautiful. And Rabbi, you brought this beautiful. When was this parsha given to the Jewish people? Right? When was the Mishkan given? B'yom Kippurim atzmo. Right? This entire reading comes on the Day of Atonement. Right? That's when Moshe was told, "Make me a mikdash." Why? What's the significance of it, the Day of Atonement being the day when we receive the Mishkan? As I said last night in my sermon, that one of the focuses of the Mishkan is that it's like a reminder of the sin of the golden calf. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Yavo Zahav Sheba Mishkan Yichaper Al Zahav Shenasa Bo Egel. God says, let the gold that makes the Mishkan be a kapara, an atonement for the gold that we use to make the golden calf, right? And they quote a verse, Vayitparku Kol Amet Bizmei Zahav. They took off their earrings made of gold and so on. Ulekach Mitkaprin Bezahav, right? That's the reason why the sanctuary is made from gold, to remind us of how we misuse the gold. But it's also interesting, of course, because the same gold that we misused was the gold that we had taken with us as a reminder of our leaving.
You got to read the last line. It's so beautiful.
Our leaving Egypt, right? And so therefore, V'zot ha'truma asher tichu mi'itam zahav amar kadosh baruch hu ki ale aruchalach u'makotayach pa'ech. That God says that they quote Jeremiah that says, "I will restore health to you. I will heal you of your wounds," meaning the gold that was given to them from Egypt was itself the healing, right? To use it for the sake of the holy was the healing. But even when they had used it and misused it for the golden calf, there was a way out. There was a way for them to make tikkun and restoration and repair. And the Mikdash comes to set the record straight. It becomes a place where they can get a second chance to reuse this gold that they took with them from Egypt.
I'm thinking about this as like, how could we sort of translate this idea into a practice for us? I'm thinking like, what is my greatest sin made out of? And can I take whatever that stuff is, that energy, and build a Mishkan? And what does that mean? It's such a powerful idea and so hopeful, right? It's really,
It's redemptive.
It's redemptive, it's redemptive. We could have like a whole workshop on like thinking about your greatest sin and like what it's made of and repurposing that material, so to speak.
And if we take what you're saying, like from the beginning, it's like the greatest sin, but before that, how the greatest sin was a misuse of the wealth, the gift that you had, that you deserved. Meaning, like you came out of suffering.
Reparations.
Right? It's like here you are,
yeah.
and we had a chance to use it.
Yeah.
And how it often, right? It's a very powerful psycho-spiritual through line from the gold of Egypt all the way to the gold of Mishkan. We're gonna do one.
Should we do one more? It's 9:06, or should we stop here and open it up?
Okay, I do, but yes, let's open up. And then we really want to get to the meat of this, but we're going to stop for a moment and go into our.
Just a reminder so that we can get as many voices as possible on the table to be concise. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. We're going to let Jay go ahead. Jay, go ahead.
Shabbat Shalom. This is my bar mitzvah portion, and as a tikkun to what was allowed to boys in the West Bronx back when I was getting bar mitzvah in those mills, I've always tried to give a Dvar Torah, and as much as I try to go to the rest of the parsha, I always come back to verses 2 and 8, which to me are the really what's glitters here. And one of the things that's always puzzled me, and I thought you were going to get to it, so I'm going to ask you if you can, which is the whole thing of tikhu. And the other thing is, until verse 9, which you pointed out is sort of perhaps a thought that Moshe didn't know what to do, it's all in the plural. It's all in the plural. So it's the actions themselves of the people in terms of giving and taking, which has always puzzled me, and I've always tried to really understand that and the possibilities of that. So I'm wondering if you could elucidate that a bit. The fact that it's in the plural, it's not about, I don't think it's the royal Moshe, it's about the plural, it's about the people.
I think you just answered the question. It's not about Moshe, it's about the people. You just said it.
Right, but what does it mean for the people to take rather than give? I like your notion of empowerment. Yeah. It's a more active thing. That's one. So, but it sounded like Rabbi Ingber had a bit of a different take on it. So I'm just curious to open that up a bit.
Rabbi Ingber?
Well, we're gonna look at we're hoping to get to some midrashim that actually focus on the word to take and reframe the word itself. And it might be interesting to, when we get there, to imagine why they feel the need to do so. I mean, it's clear from the midrashim that we brought today that the word, tikhu, has another valence that seems to be where the rabbis want to go with it. I think the simplest meaning of this, of course, is that it's not really voluntary, right? I think that the simplest meaning of this is that actually there's a generosity that is also something that is required. Like, it doesn't seem like the Mishkan is like, if they want to, then you build it, right? It doesn't say to them, hey, what do you guys think about building a Mishkan, right? There's a quality of this that is certainly commanded as a work, right? Commanded, and there is, and there's also, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. So there's a quality of this that's clearly not optional or voluntary, but there's also a quality that is deeply dependent upon generosity. So there's that tension, I think, there.
It's another paradox.
It's another paradox.
It's like when you're obligated, but you're willing rather than doing it against your will.
Right.
Right, and the qualitative experience of that is vastly different.
So I don't know if that's sufficient, but I think we could explore more on that when we come to the Midrashim. Okay, thank you. Aluma.
Aluma, show us your face if you can.
You know what? I just moved to Boston and I'm very disorganized right now, so I'm rather not sure where I am.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Thank you. It's temporary, but anyway, I'm very curious. How much of this really, well, a lot of it to me seems to be about occupying a between space, from the idea of the heaven and the footstool, from the idea of dwelling within, from the idea of what exists between the cherubim, there's a concept of knowing how to be between, even the fact that the gold is to be brought in to consummate and integrate a place of in-between, of integration. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but it's something I'm kind of questioning. And to me, Zoom also seems to be a place of between, pulling back so there's that between space for other people to dwell.
I so love that, and it evokes for me, Martin Buber's I Thou theology, that where the presence emerges is in between. And maybe another in between is the paradoxes that we've been sort of, mentioning this morning. Like there are all these paradoxes, right? Between or in between places, heaven and earth, human and divine. And how could the one who is everything sort of fit on this earth? You want to say anything else?
Yeah, I think the in-between spaces are, as you well know, I think that I say we're the people of the door for a reason. I think the in-between and the liminal is actually what we are, one of the deepest Torahs of our people. And I think that the Mishkan obviously is not a final resting place, because there eventually will be a Beit HaMikdash, a temple, and
which is also not a final resting place.
Which is also not a final resting place. And
there is no final resting place.
There is no final, right? But the desert is certainly the in between Egypt and the Holy Land. I mean, there's a lot of in between. And when you said Zimzum instead of Tzimtzum, I think I all of a sudden understood that we're in a Zoom, and that I was like, I really think that that's true. I think all of this in between. Zoom and Tzimtzum, we're all in between right now in this space. You're in Boston, it's only temporary. Everything is just
hybrid.
Hybrid. So thank you for that question. I think it's a pointing us in a beautiful place. Okay, Elliot, go ahead.
Elliot, we don't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. So first, I just want to quickly salute Jay up in Toronto, a fellow boy from the Bronx, and then I just was, as we were reading this and talking about it, I was very much reminded of the flood, and God's instructions to Noah, to make an ark, another ark. This one, of cypress wood, and this one, caulked inside and out with pitch, and just the difference, between the two arks, and the difference, in God, in terms of, God, instructing Noah to do this, at the point where he's about to destroy, the world. And at this point, and sort of just the contrast sort of struck me, and similarity.
And that moment of being about survival, and this moment sort of feels much more about like the unfolding love story.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a very different moment relationally.
Right.
Do you want to say anything?
Beautiful. Yeah. So, Richard?
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. First an observation and then a brief comment. The difference between being on Zoom and in a sanctuary on Saturday morning is, for me, phenomenal. I mean, the difference is overwhelming. Zoom is just not as satisfactory at all. It's a signal to me that spirituality, which is between people for me much more than from up there to down here, occurs best in a community. And that's what the Mishkan represents for me. And it was important for all the time in the desert to have a place of community gathering, just as it's really important, I think, for all of us to have a place of community gathering and good times. So the impact of such person-to-person interaction that occurs, for example, with singing, is so spiritually important. And the Mishkan for me is a symbol of that. That is, they went across the desert and then forever. They needed such a place to resonate with each other and therefore to be spiritual with each other.
Yeah, I think that's a very resonant for I think
For this moment.
For this moment,
Yes.
for all of us. Last night, talked a lot last night about what community, what the shul meant in Eastern Europe, and for talking about the cantorial arts last night, and how I heard from someone this week that the Jews came to the shul to cry. That's why so much of the music became so minor and so evocative in that way. And obviously they also came to laugh, and they also came to dance, and they came to celebrate. And yeah, there's something that happens in a physical space that is, that's not really replaceable through a virtual screen. That's for sure. It's pretty clear. So can we go back to the text and then come back, because we have quite a bit of hands here, and we really would like to go back to the text, and then we'll come back in about 10 minutes or so. Keep your hands up if you could, and hope you don't get too tired with your hands up.
Right,
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're gonna come back to the text. Can you all see it? Yeah, great. Yeah, you want to take this one? We have a number of models of what the Mishkan's purpose is here.
Want to do this one first, or the Shir Shirim?
Up to you.
Let's do the Shir Shirim first, and then we'll do that one. Okay. So let's go up to the verses from Shir Shirim and give them a little context for that, and then we'll do this midrash. Here we go. Okay, so this is from the 5th chapter of the Song of Songs, which is like magnificent love story on one level between a man and a woman, between two human beings, but the rabbis read it, and I think for good reason, as the love story between God and the Jewish people. So in the 5th chapter, in the female's voice, says the following: Ani sheina v'libi er. I was asleep, but my heart was awake. Kol dodi dofek. My hark, my beloved knocks. Pitchili achoti. So now this is the male voice. Pitchili achoti. Open up, my sister, my beloved. Rayati, Yonati, my dove. Tamati, my pure one. Sheroshi nimlatal. Futzatai risisei laila. For my head is drenched with dew, my locks with the damp of night. So the lover is outside, he's, getting all wet, he wants to come in, and he knocks, and what happens later in the chapter, or right after this, she says, I'm gonna get my feet dirty, I can't get up and put my robe on, and she actually delays. And then she finally opens the door and he's not there. So it's like, she's been waiting 5 chapters for her beloved, and then she delays. He's not there. It's such an interesting and I think telling moment. Okay, so now the midrash that's based on these verses. Davar acher vayechu litruma hadahu dichtiv.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Just keeps going.
Okay. So now we're talking about understanding and take for me an offering, and they use the verses from Song of Songs to understand this verse. Ani she'ena v'libi er, as we just read, I was sleeping but my heart was awake. Amra Knesset Yisrael. So the people of Israel said, Ani yashanti li min hakates. I have been asleep in regard to the end, or this is like short for the end time, the time of redemption. Ella hakadosh baruch hu er, but God, the Holy Blessed One, is awake, as it says in Psalms, Shne'emar, Sur levavi v'chalki Elohim le'olam. The rock of my heart, my portion is Elohim forever. So they're using the verse from Psalms to indicate that Elohim has like a forever time in mind, right? So there's the limited consciousness of the human being concerning the end time and the more expansive consciousness of the divine. And then it goes on to say, Ani yeshena min ha-mitzvot. I am sleeping, I'm asleep to the mitzvot. Aval zechut avotai omedet li v'libi er. So I might be screwing up on the front of the mitzvot. However, the merit of my forefathers stand for me, or give me hope perhaps, and my heart is awake. And then, now we're getting to our issue. Ani yeshena mima'aseh ha'egel. I am asleep because of the sin of the golden calf. V'libi er, and my heart is awake. Why? V'hakadosh baruch hu martik alai. And the Holy Blessed One is, I guess, knocking at my heart. But it's interesting. Meratek in Hebrew is like contemporary Hebrew, something about brilliance, right, or being fascinated. So I'm not sure what the connection is. Vayechu hede, vayechu li truma. So that's why we have and take from me truma. It's a way of, knocking at my heart. Pitchili, and now we have a proof text. Pitchili achoti rayati. Open for me, my sister, my beloved. Ad matai eheyeh mithalech below bayit. How long am I going to go without a house? And then this quote again from Song of Songs: Shiroshi nimlatal. My head is drenched in dew. Ella asuli mikdash. Rather, make for me a house or a sanctuary, a holy sanctuary. Shelo eheyeh bachutz. So I won't be standing outside, or so I won't be outside. And it's just such a beautiful articulation of God's wanting to be inside with us in an intimate space.
So in this reading, in this rendering of the Mishkan through the Midrashic lens, the rabbis of the Midrash are clearly imagining the Mishkan as a place, as a project that was intending to awaken the Jews from a slumber, a sleep of some kind. And in their rendering, the Mishkan again is this place where in its building, because I think that's the beginning of the Midrash, is like in the project itself, right? We become awakened to something that we were asleep to, and that God hasn't given up on us, right? So God is awake. In the first rendering, like God is awake, and even though we were sleeping, right? God, we weren't deserving, and that was our sleep. And then God said, "You're still deserving because your ancestors were there." So God has not given up on us, and the Mishkan becomes the expression of God's, emunah, God's faith in us, God's trust in us, and that's in the beginning of it. And then, or there's one piece where it's our own trust in ourselves, like it's like that we haven't, right? God, so it's the divine is saying, don't give up on yourselves. I haven't given up on you because you sinned. Don't give up on yourselves because you're not so awake to the mitzvot, right? Your ancestors were, and so the whole Mishkan is just like this great, reminder of the possibility that we can still build things, even when we've destroyed things, we can still build them.
And there's a link between despair and sleeping and hope and wakefulness. And there's something about being awake, I guess it's obvious, that creates the conditions for intimacy with the divine.
Right.
And the intimacy with anybody.
Right.
If you're not awake, how do you meet one another?
It's you've given up. It's a kind of like Freud, one of the ways that people split off when when they feel like the pain is overwhelming is they go to sleep, right?
Exactly.
Sleeping is to get drowsy, right?
I do that.
And we all do that. It's
sure.
It's too much. You just want the world to go away.
Right.
And so there's a way that being awake, that God is the ultimate expression inwardly and outwardly of it's never over. Like it continues. It's possible to be redeemed. And then the last piece, though, that's so really complicated and interesting also, which is God is dependent on us, which is very Heschel. It's like, how long am I going to be outside?
Yeah.
I can't go inside unless you let me in.
Yeah. This is very much Heschel's book, God in Search of Man.
God in Search of Man. Right. So how long am I going to be walking outside? God is in the like the midrashic audacity here. It's like there's a midrashic chutzpah that says, like, this is the way we imagine God. God is knocking on the door, getting sopping wet, like, Gene Kelly and, singing in the rain and going like, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. I'm knocking on the door, like,
let
me in. It's like,
right.
So this is just one. I know that, I certainly want us to come back to this, but should we go to the especially because I want to talk about the lekach tov, because I feel like this piece is very much connected to what Jay was asking about the word mekach and lekach. So in this iteration of what the Mishkan is for, we once again see, this is our second piece here around the Mishkan. In this piece, we see the divine also looking for a place to live, like in the Tzimtzum, Zimzum, make a space for me. But the make a space for me here is a little bit less about the erotic and the plaintive yearning of the divine who is impotent because humans need to do it. And it has a little bit more of it's interesting just to see this. So the Midrash says, V'ikuli truma, and it's, quoting the verse that begins our parsha, take for me a gift. Yesh lecha mekach, or mikach, shemi shemecharon nimkar imo. So the Midrash here, as we said, Jay, I said that we're going to see the word mekach or lekach. The word to take, lakachet, is also connected to the word for a business transaction. Mekach is a business transaction. So is it possible, the Midrash says, that you have somebody who sells wares, right, and sells themselves with the thing, that they sold?
Like I sell my car, it's a used car. I was like, I'm coming with the car.
I'm coming with the car.
I'm coming with the car.
Right? So the Midrash says, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, here we are in the second line. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Israel, God says to Israel in the Midrashic reading, Macharti lachem Torati, I've sold my Torah to you. Kivyachol, as it were, Nimkarti ima, I'm sold with her, it. Shenemar b'kuli truma. Take me, literally, they're reading it hyper literally. Take me as part of the deal. Mashal Melech, and this is where the parable gets really interesting. It's a parable to a king, Shayelo Bas Yechida, has an only daughter. A king comes and takes her, literally, very weird phrase, but like marries her. He wants to go back to his land and take his wife with him. Amar lo biti shnatati lecha yichiditi. The king says to the my daughter is my only daughter. Lifrosh mimena eini achol. I can't completely separate from her. Oy gewalt, therapy. Lomar lecha al titla eini achol. Lefishi ishtecha. He says, I can't tell you not to take her because she's your wife. Ella, what? Zu tuva aseli. Do this favor for me. Shekom makom shata holech. In any place that you go, kiton achad. Make like one apartment. Like one place, sha'adur etzlechem, so I can live with you. I can't leave my daughter. Kach amar kadosh baruch hu Yisrael. So in the parable, come back to the story. This is what God said to the Jewish people. Natati lechem et Torah. I gave you the Torah. Lifrosh mena eini achol. I can't separate myself from the Torah. Lamar lechem al tidlua eini achol. I can't tell you not to take her. Every place that you go, make a little house for me. That I can live within it. That's what it means. Make for me the sanctuary. Make a little pied-à-terre, a little place where I can come to live in your midst with my Torah.
I think the issue of God having to separate from Torah in a way that is painful for God is really interesting. Like maybe there is this separation within God in order for us to have Torah below. And it does remind me, and we talked a little bit about this, of the whole function of Christ and Christianity. Like, the Father has to let go of the Son in order to be incarnate amongst us.
And so there's a kind of pathos here in this reading. In order for the Torah, like trying to imagine what the rabbis are trying to depict here, like the connecting to the word lekach, ki lekach tov, in another midrash, ki lekach tov natati lechem, right? That's, I give you this great Torah, this great lesson, Torati al ta'azav, don't leave me behind. But I don't want to leave my Torah. I don't want to leave my Torah. So
I'm attached.
I'm
really
attached.
Yeah.
And what might that mean? I guess that's the question here.
Yeah.
In both of these framings of the Mishkan as the place that we make room for God because God is knocking on the door, right? As you say, as make room. And in this midrash, like, what does it mean that God has to be close to the Torah? That, make a place for me because the Torah is because God watches over the Torah, is because it's possible to learn Torah, as we discussed, without God, and that the Torah will then just become this fun thing, but we'll leave God and spirit, not connected to it.
And it also explains how we experience God when we study Torah. Like, it does feel like God is present with us when we study Torah.
Exactly, very much so.
But Torah and God are not identical.
Like in this midrash, Torah and God are not identical. One remarkable thing, and then we're going to open this up, just the source that you brought from the Sfas Emes about what it means to live with someone, right? The word adur, which is used in the midrash, God says in God's words, adur, I want to make me a place where I can adur, I can live with you. Ladur means to live in Hebrew, and it's, right, the word dira is an apartment, right? So, and that's a famous Kabbalistic idea that this world is God's dira b'tachtonim. It's a place where God lives in this world. But connected to this week being the week in which Adar, the month of Adar, was celebrated, and its connection to this midrash, we have this last source that we're going to open up, and then we'll open it up. Do you want to?
You want to do this one?
Yeah.
I have no idea what all the Rashi Tevot are.
That's Avi, right? Adoni. Like this is right,
okay,
right.
Cool.
My grandfather.
All right. Higid al Chodesh Adar.
Al Shem Mashkatuv.
I'm sorry, what?
Al Shem Mashkatuv.
Al Shem Mashkatuv. You better read this.
Bamidrash Aseli Kiton Va'adur Beinechem. So the Sfat Emet is the great late 19th century Hasidic master from the lineage of Gur or Ger, and he quotes his great-grandfather, his grandfather, who I think was the, if not the Imre Emes, or the, maybe, I'm not sure, might be the Alter Rebbe, the first Ger Rebbe, who says that the word Adar is connected to this midrash that we just read, where God says, make me a little room so that I can live with you. Pirush, Leidash Akol Mimenu Yitbarach. That he reads this spiritually as that everything one needs to know that everything comes from God. Hakol Mimenu, everything comes from God. And that gives chizuk la'adam, that gives that strength. V'adar al shem chizuk. And the word Adar, which is the month, is connected to the word Adir Bamarom Adonai. God is Adir, God is strong. Right, that God's strength, that there's the teaching in the Gemara says that when somebody's arrogant, God says we can't live together because there's no room for me. And so the word, that I might live with you means making room for me to live with you is to get strength that when I'm living with you, because, there's a lack of arrogance or there's a kind of humility that gives one strength to see that everything is from God, or that God is with us in all moments. And that's what it means to live with us, that we see that God is with us in all moments. So I think that was, unless there's something else that you'd like to share.
No, that's good.
All right, so we have a lot of hands. We're going to go Paul and the Shema. Go ahead, Paul.
Good Shabbos. Wow. Okay. Well, I put my hand up when we looked at the first midrash, where Moshe says back to God, hey, this idea of a sanctuary, it can't contain you. It's not going to work. And if you look back in our narrative, I mean, for 4 centuries, we've been in slavery and we've experienced the power of Hashem in very direct ways. Everything is really primordial, atavistic. And now we're being asked to go into this heavily mediated experience of the Mishkan. And I related, to what Aluma said, and then you said, Rabbi David, about Tzimtzum and Tzum, because I feel as though we are now stuck in this mediated Mishkan. But what is our sin? I think it's the same sin as the Israelites were doing then. They became complacent. They were slumbering. they lost the majesty and the preciousness of direct experience. It's only when we're reminded of the human experience of something like my head drenched with dew, which is the life that we need to engage directly.
Beautiful. It reminds me of Romemu members Anna Levy-Lyons and Jeff Levy-Lyons, who are environmental activists, said to me recently that we need to re-imbue the world with reverence. You know, and like and how do we do that?
Yeah, the re-enchantment of the world.
Re-enchantment of the world.
Yeah.
And so it's such, I mean, Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, is such an embodied text, you know, and I love that the rabbis, you know, use that to evoke our relationship with God.
Yeah, it's very powerful just to think about the world as the Mishkan. I mean, there's one frame in which the Mishkan is a replica of the creation of the world, and we talked about this, that we didn't bring it this time, but of course, if you study the parshiyot that have to do with the Mishkan, it's clear that they use the language, it evokes the language of creation. And so there was a way that the Mishkan was, you know, intending to remind people of the power of creation, the power of the world itself. And
that's another way of another understanding of like to take, and the action, you know, the supreme sort of action in that word is like we're recreating the world by building. Like, wow, talk about being empowered.
Right, and so there is there's that tension between human agency as like the power that we have to create a world, and also sometimes in our creative mode we sometimes forget about the world as it's been created. So it's kind of like that place between the two, right? It's like we're empowered to create a world, we create a Mishkan, we're partners with God, and that can lead us to actually make great things and remind ourselves that we have that koach, and then also sometimes to disconnect from the world in its natural state too, and both of those are true. That's quite a
Thank
piece.
you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Helio in Brazil, go ahead.
Oh, you said Neshama, I think. No?
Oh, Neshama, excuse me. Neshama, go ahead.
Neshama.
Yeah, Neshama.
Oh, okay, it is me then. Well, this is so rich. It's just extraordinary. And I think I noticed before you even got to that, make an apartment for your in-laws, which is very much like lifting your enemy's ox from the ditch if it has fallen down, not necessarily enmity, but I thought, and it goes back to the mishpatim, and it goes back to the everyday, and it goes back to the covenant, and it goes back to leaving Egypt with all the gold and jewels, which is what were the benefits? What do we take from not having been free and from learning how to build and from having been enslaved? What is the gold? Because we've already established it's not material. That's symbolic. All of that is symbolic, but it was the palace of the king. Now it's the palace of our king, so to speak. And everything that is most beautiful, richest, will be used so that God can dwell within and without in the world and within our hearts. But that which is best and most beautiful that we have. So that's the covenant. And I loved everything that was coming up, including God comes with the Torah. So, you know, you don't have the Torah without God. You don't have it without the covenant. So, and then the dew as well, which is an awakening, a rebirth. Every new morning we awaken, and we look again at the little room or big room that we create for the one. And so, and it's been said,
Yes.
I see people saying it in the chat.
Yeah.
Everything that we've ever learned and know in
Yes.
our past, our ancestors, everything is the Mishkan. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you,
Neshama.
Neshama.
Beautiful. we have about 6 minutes, and we have four hands. So Elio, go ahead. Amy, Daniel, Ronnie.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
All the time, this text, we are talking about this paradox of duality, in, out. Of course, God say, do a Mishkan that I dwell with you. Out of the Mishkan, God don't dwell with us. You say, Tzimtzum in Mishkan. Out of Mishkan is not Tzimtzum. Of course, it's Tzimtzum too. So I think this in, out, this paradox, this duality is to remember us that this is a form, but this is another form, that is a monistic one, that always one.
Yes.
Because we don't have out of God. Yeah. I think it's very nice too that God is awake, so God sleep.
Yeah.
I think it's very good, this language.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just restate a little bit.
Yeah, I think Helio is speaking to the paradox of form and formless. That's the language usually used in Buddhism, but it's very much part in the midrash that we saw from the Rav Kahana, where the rabbis imagined a very Moshe saying, "There's no place that you can live in, God." Isn't that the definition of you? You're not housable. You're not limited, right? And then the midrash dispels that and says, no, God is both of those things, right? So to the extent that we honor the duality and the non-duality, we have to say that God is, in form as well as beyond form, and so the importance of both of those. And I think that that's a lot of what we're wrestling with here. So go ahead, Amy.
Rabbi.
Yes. Rabbis. Yes.
I want to refer to Onkelos, and in verse 2 it says they should separate before me a contribution. So I want to really briefly read this paragraph. It's a small paragraph. In the biblical text, the verb take is found twice in the verse and once in the next. The Targumus renders the first separate, since it refers to the farmer's contribution. We've translated the second and third, which have the same Aramaic root as contribution, since they are nouns. By translating the first verb as separate, he avoids the homiletic lesson based on the fact that the Bible does not state give. Take, it is said, must imply that, and this is the most important thing I could say to you, that when contributing to the service of God, one is really receiving. Ibn Ezra explains that the first take implies two actions, take and give. And I just want to say, Tekashim in verse 5 is the multicolored skin. I'm sticking to my guns. It's a unicorn.
Amy, I love that. I love that, sort of rendering of take as both to take and give, that it's like within that word is kind of a paradox in itself. Thank you.
Yeah, Daniel and Ronnie, go ahead, Daniel.
So I read a commentary that says there is more about the Mishkan and its contents than any other subject in the Torah. And I thought that was really fascinating, that there's more about the Mishkan than any other subject in the Torah. And I was thinking, wait a minute, is there a teaching hidden in plain sight here that is just so obvious from a psycho-spiritual perspective that it's just glaring? And what's glaring to me is that there's no place in the discussion about the Mishkan of the name Shekhinah. This beautiful name is never mentioned in the Torah for the indwelling presence within all of us. That is the place of intimacy that we're all trying to awaken to and be aware of. It's like, was the divine feminine purposely left out of the Torah in terms of that name, Shekhinah? It just seems so obvious that that name could have been mentioned in the Torah right here and right now to have given us a beautiful name. What happened?
Yeah, no, I just say that certainly the feminine in general was left out of the Torah in terms of divinity. There's no doubt about that. But the word Shekhinah is actually from, in other words, you're working from the wrong direction. The rabbinic construction of Shekhinah is from this parsha. In other words, they called it Shekhinah because of V'shachanti b'tocham, the phrase that the Shekhinah, I will dwell within you. The Shekhinah actually emerges from this, but you're right, there's no mention in the Torah of the divine
I
feminine.
don't think the divine feminine, it is in terms of Shekhinah, in terms of that specific word, but El Shaddai is like God of the, one can understand, it's God of the
That's true.
I think there are and we're not going to go into it now, there are lots of sort of hidden feminine imagery of God in the Torah.
Right.
So on one level, it's totally left out, but when you dig,
well, thank God that it emerged when they constructed it that way, to imagine the Mishkan as the place where the Shekhinah dwells.
Yeah.
And as God saying, let me in that beautiful, that's stunning.
And the truths of the Torah unfold over time. And they're unfolding right now in
the chat.
Zim Zoom.
In the Zim Zoom.
In the Zim Zoom.
We're going to go to Ronnie and then we're going to close it up. Ronnie, go ahead.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you all.
Shabbat
This
Shalom.
is so layered and full. And for me, this all allows for a different paradox, which is the Torah without God. And here's what I mean. The Mishkan seems to be something like a transitional object, which God feels the people need in the desert after the golden calf. It's sort of a reparation. But once they build the holy temple in Jerusalem, where God is supposed to dwell, is completely off limits for everybody all the time, except for the high priest and except on Yom Kippur. And I was struck that to read in one of the Midrashim that this is the Parsha that's read on Yom Kippur, that the Holy of Holies, the priest is the only one allowed in once a year. And the question for me is, was God dwelling in there or was it completely empty? In other words, God had given us the Torah, we got to the Holy Land, and then there was a kind of tzimtzum, which is to say, now it's up to you. The Torah and I are inside you. You don't need this transitional object anymore.
Or the transitional object is now the Torah.
Well, yes, right.
Right. It's a different transitional object.
It's a different transitional object. Yes, but yes, okay. Good, thank you.
Well, let me clarify something in the Midrash. It didn't say that we read this parsha on Yom Kippur. That's my mistake. It meant that it was given. This parsha was given in the Torah, as it were, on Yom Kippur, and the Midrash was making the connection between the Day of Atonement and the atonement that the Mishkan signifies, because it uses the gold of the golden calf, and so it kind of the repurposing of that which was used, the material in the wrong place, but. Thank you so much. That's a brilliant thing. We're gonna come in for a close. And any final thoughts? No. Okay.
I'm just struck by what Ronnie said about emptiness. You know, is the space empty or is it full with God's presence? And I'm wondering if we often mistake emptiness, or if we call something empty because we're not able or not willing to feel a certain presence, I'm not sure I'm being clear about that. But maybe emptiness and fullness in terms of God's presence are the same, but it's a matter of how we experience it and what we call it.
So I think that my last thoughts on this are, I'm just taken by this whole process, this class this morning, because it's amazing how, of all of the things that we've thought about in terms of the Mishkan, there was only one person that mentioned an actual physical Mishkan, and that was Richard. Richard, in all the comments, the only one who mentioned the loss of the physical location of the sanctuary, or the sense of being together as a community. And again, I don't know, Richard might not have been intending to talk about the physical space of a synagogue or a community center or whatever it might be, but the possibility of all of us gathering together, being able to sing together and so on. Usually that needs a physical location, but I was very taken by the early comment, like some of the early comments in the chat area, where they were talking about how, that Max, I think it was somebody had written in the name of a rabbi who said that God doesn't change, but we do. And when we're in certain spaces, we become different people. And I think that it's pretty remarkable to talk about the building of a sanctuary and the building of a physical location and also the building of a community. And it's focusing so much on generosity and on, all these kinds of things. And I think that it's very natural to go to the more spiritual place and to talk about the inner sanctuary. But it's really clear to me that we need these, physical locations. We need our physical community. We need our ability to gather together in a
It's a different kind of presence,
Yeah,
as Richard was saying.
It's a different kind of
we're
presence.
together in one room, right? So we hold out hope that we can regather.
Absolutely.